This is what you should feel. You are what you should feel.
Growing up, we stayed at my grandparents' house during the holidays. Both my parents worked full-time, so it made handling us over the vacation difficult. Our grandparents lived in the countryside in an old creepy house. I always remember it had a weird smell to it. Kinda sweet, but not in a good way. I want to say old cheese, but to be honest, I don't know what that smells like. My brother and I would share a room. We had a separate musty old bed each with what I called old people flowers print on the blankets. Whenever our parents said we were staying there, we begged not to. Not only was it boring, but as we got older, we noticed weird things more and more. Maybe we slept heavier when we were younger, I don't know. At night, we would hear our grandparents' voices outside calling to us. The first time it happened, I looked out the window, but saw nothing. When I turned around, I saw my brother was awake. "I hear them too," he whispered, eyes wide. I hurried back to bed and put my blankets over my head. After that, we started hearing knocks from inside the walls at night. Never more than one at a time, though. So, thinking back, this wasn't paranormal? Here's one event I remember quite clearly. My brother and I were a little older by now, and my grandparents let us stay up a little later to watch TV or read or whatever. They always went to bed around 8 p.m. and told us that we had to be in bed by 9 to 9:30. Being a little rebellious, we always stayed up until around 10 or even later after we figured out that they slept like logs. Anyways, we were staying up watching TV in the living room. I was lying down on the old brown sofa, and my brother was sitting on the floor, leaning against it. We then hear a knock behind us. We both kind of jump because of the silence of the house and the suddenness of the knock. But when nothing further happens, we settle back down into watching TV. Then, we hear another knock off to the left of us, on the wall we were closest to. Then I hear my grandfather's voice calling out to me from outside. Then another knock, this time from the TV stand. We ran so fast to our bedroom we didn't even turn off the TV. We dove under our covers and pulled the blankets over our heads. Unfortunately, the knocks and voices followed us, but somehow we fell asleep. We awoke to our grandfather yelling at us for leaving the TV on all night and wasting his money. We tried explaining what happened over breakfast, but our grandfather refused to believe us. Our grandmother just stayed silent. We begged our parents over the phone to let us come home early. They eventually relented. Our dad took time off work or something. After that, he always made alternate arrangements for our holidays. Talking to him later in life, he told us that he experienced the same kind of things as a kid and could tell by our terror that we were telling the truth. We still went over to our grandparents for special events like Christmas, but thankfully, never stayed overnight there, ever again. In my teens, when I lived with my parents, we would all hear a mimic off and on for years. Even my older sister said she experienced it before she moved out. I'd be playing video games with my door closed, and on more than one occasion, I've heard my mum call my name from down the hall. I would immediately pause the game and crack my door open, and my mum wouldn't be standing there. I'd search through the house, and of course she'd be sound asleep in her room, as she stopped in to say goodnight hours ago. After a while I got used to that trick, so the next time I heard what I thought was my mum's voice, I'd ignore it and wait. If it really was her, I could tell if she entered the hallway by watching the light from the crack under the door from my bed, because real mum would make her way to my room. If I didn't see those shadows, I knew it wasn't her. Only a handful of times have I heard any one of my other family members' voices while I was the only one home. When I was like 10, I rode the bus home from school and would often beat my parents home. I'd sit up in the front room and do my homework while I waited for them to get back home. Nokia bricks were a thing, so I'd give them a call and say I made it home. I would get focused on my homework or daydreaming or whatever, and I'd hear my mum or dad call out that they were home from the same hallway by my bedroom. There was a door to the laundry room and garage halfway down the hall. Only the problem was that I did not hear the loud garage door or garage entry door open or shut, just a sudden spontaneous voice out of nowhere. My dog would hear the voice too. It would bark and then show visible confusion and then growl. My mum would also regularly pop into my room or wherever I was and ask if I called her or if I said something. The answer was mostly no. She would also pop in with an answer to an irrelevant question a mimic apparently asked on my behalf. On occasion, I'd catch Mum respond to a mimic's voice that I did not hear. Even I'd do the same. Mum would also tell me she heard my voice and my dad's voice when she was getting ready for bed or deep into the night. On another occasion, we both heard my sister interject in a conversation of ours from the other room. We were having some conversation about a TV series we liked in the kitchen. Then both of us heard my sister's voice say, "Hello, I'm here," clear as day from the other room. This is years after my sister moved out. She still had a key for emergencies, but one look around the corner told us she didn't use it that day. Kind of amazing that we both heard that, and the mimic must have been holding onto my sister's 16-year-old voice for years. The most disturbing aspect of the mimic was that I felt it could distort or alter our speech in real time, as if it was speaking through a curtain that was between us. My mum and I are having a conversation about the groceries. Mum would ask what I wanted. I'd tell her some stuff that I was craving. She responds with some ingredient that'd be good, and I heard her say, "Oh, how about you get lost?" Which was completely out of context, and the words I heard didn't even match how her mouth moved. I asked, "What?" And she repeated. I said, "Oh, how about some fresh basil?" If you made it this far, thanks for the listen. Feels good to share these little experiences. Okay, so back in the spring of 2006, I was a 10-year-old girl living in Idaho. My family weren't rich, not even really well off. On holidays, my parents would send us to our auntie's place because she had time off due to being a teacher, and my parents both worked full-time. There were 3 of us kids, myself included. Unfortunately though, my auntie was single at the time and only had one small spare bedroom. When I mean small, I mean it was probably only intended for storage. A single bed barely fit in it. So this meant our oldest sister, Rachel, stayed in there. And my younger sister, Becky, and I slept in the living room. One on the couch, one on cushions on the floor. Us kids had all experienced slightly creepy things over the years in this house. Yes, as small as it was still a house. Yet they were all so subtle. Individually, we could just dismiss them. But after this event, we all started sharing our experiences and realized something was going on and had been for quite some time. This event I'm about to describe still gives me chills to this day, and just thinking about it makes my eyes tear up. So it was the spring vacation. My sisters and I had spent the day playing around outside, doing kid stuff. You know, riding our bikes, playing around, etc. All within sight of the house, of course, stranger danger and all that. The day was warmer than usual and we were all kinda tired from our day, so I opted to go to bed early for us anyway, at around 10. My younger sister Becky and I chatted a bit while laying on our makeshift beds for sleep. Becky was suddenly not replying, so I knew she had fallen asleep, so I settled myself in to go to sleep as well. It came easily and I was soon sleeping. I awoke in the middle of the night suddenly. No idea the time because it was dark, but I'd guess anywhere between 12 to 2 a.m. I had no way to know though. I lay there on the couch trying to get back to sleep when I thought I saw something near the end of the couch. Saw isn't the right word though, because I looked and looked as my eyes adjusted to the dark, but nothing was there. It was more that I sensed something. Starting to feel creeped out, I looked down at Becky to see if it was maybe her, but she was sleeping soundly. I pulled my blanket over my head and tried as hard as I could to convince myself that there was nothing there. With the blankets over my head, that sense that someone was at the end of the couch became so intense that it was overwhelming. I couldn't take it and threw the blanket off and peered in the direction. Nothing. Still unnerved, but glad no one was there, I settled back down to sleep. And then I heard it. "Sam, what are you doing?" The voice was so faint and familiar, like the speaker was trying to not wake Becky but also didn't want to whisper. It was coming from the end of the couch. "Sam, what are you doing?" This time a little louder, but exactly the same. It was my auntie's voice, but seemed devoid of any of the cheerfulness that she always had. "Aunt Sue?" I squeaked out, terrified but unsure what to do. "Sam, what are you doing?" This time, right behind my head. That was it. I jumped up and ran to my aunt's room as fast as I could, screaming the whole way. The commotion woke Becky up, who instinctively followed after me in a daze. I flung open the door to my aunt's room and of course she was still there, now sitting up in bed startled. I explained what happened as best as I could, and Becky and I slept in my aunt's bed with her for the rest of the stay. Unbelievably, my older sister Rachel slept through all of the commotion. That girl could sleep through anything. Weird things continued to happen to all of us there, and my aunt eventually moved. That was the scariest night of my life, and also the scariest thing to have happened to any of us in that house. I still have no idea what that was, and now cannot fall asleep on a couch, still to this day. One summer, my dad was home for a few weeks to fix the roof on one of the buildings on our property. I was in a bad place health-wise, so I was mostly in the house, crocheting and watching scary movies. One day, it was pretty windy. It's usually windy here, but it was rattling the windows and making a lot of noise. Clearly not a great day to be on the roof. So my dad had promised that he wouldn't get up on the ladder and just do some other yard work. I'd grown tired of whatever I'd been watching, and so I had the TV off and was focusing on my crocheting. My dad hadn't been back to the house since lunch, but he had said he would probably just lay in a hammock and read for a bit. I suddenly heard him scream my name. His voice for sure, with his unique accent in a terrified tone. My name is Vanessa, so it wasn't something indistinct or easily misheard. I was worried he had gotten on the roof and lost the ladder, and that he was hanging off the roof and calling to me in terror. So I ran as fast as I could, straight into him, around the back of the house. He had a terrified look on his face, and he was out of breath like he had been running too. He asked me what was wrong. I said I'd heard him scream my name, so I assumed he was in danger. He said he'd heard me screaming in fear, as if I were hurt or in danger. Now, be cool about this. I call my dad Daddy. Anyway, Daddy does not sound anything like Vanessa. Like, not at all. And we had both hurried, so it had been at the same time that we had both heard the screams, and in each other's voices. For weeks, we tried to debunk this occurrence, We rattled the loose windows, creaked doors, listened to the tree branches when it was windy. Nothing came close. We have had a lot of small spooky things happen on the property before, but this one was obnoxious because of the mimicry of our voices. We can't figure out why it happened. If it was a ghost, demon, whatever. What was it trying to accomplish? Was it just pulling a prank? Either way, we still check out any weird stuff, and don't let this instance of mimicry lead us to assuming it's a trick instead of an actual emergency. When I was in my early 20s, my friends and I would go camping often. It was great to get out in nature, away from the noise of the city, and just drink and unwind with friends. As we got older, the friend group started going their own ways. It wasn't from fights or anything like that. Just what happens when people get older and drift apart. People getting job opportunities in different parts of the country, having kids, you know, that kind of thing. I was around 28 years old and was feeling the call of the wild again, so to speak. I suggested to my boyfriend, now husband, to go camping next chance we got. But having grown up in the city and never having gone camping, he was extremely reluctant. We'll call him Steve for privacy. So Steve and I came to a compromise. Rather than go tent camping, we would get a cabin. You know, just ease him into the wilderness. I checked around online and found one that looked decent at a reasonable price, but also far enough out of the city to give you the camping experience. Campfires, marshmallows, drinking under the stars, hiking, that kind of thing. It was late fall when we set out. I always preferred camping in fall, and although late fall was a little cooler, I figured we would be in a cabin, so Steve shouldn't be too uncomfortable. We packed everything we would need for the weekend and drove to the cabin. After about 2 hours of driving, we arrived. We picked up the keys from the office and proceeded to the cabin. It was amazing. The cabins at that campground were spaced out a lot, so there was more privacy. The woods surrounding us were dense, and you could smell that forest smell. The cabin itself was that rustic log cabin style, and well maintained. It was perfect. We unpacked and got settled. Went for a short hike around the lake, which wasn't too far away, and then came back for dinner. Steve cooked up some steaks, and I went to go get some firewood for the campfire. It wouldn't be a proper camping experience without marshmallows and drinking next to the campfire, would it? I started the campfire, and we ate dinner. After, we went out to drink some beers under the stars and roast marshmallows on a campfire. Steve was starting to really warm to the whole camping thing. I was happy. We went to bed after a couple of beers, tired from the busy day. I woke up at around 1 a.m. to go to the bathroom. After I finished and was heading back to bed, I heard something strange. There was a scratching at the front door. I paused and listened for a bit. Thinking it was just an animal, I started to continue to bed. Then, I heard something which my brain just could not comprehend. I heard a voice from where I heard the scratching. But it wasn't just any voice. It was Steve's. I couldn't quite make out the words. It just sounded like nonsense. Eventually I could make out,
Hello?
and
Are you there?
as these were repeated again and again. But they always sounded exactly the same, like it was a recording or something. I almost went to the door, but a feeling of intense dread held me back. I was kind of frozen in place. I managed to free myself and went to check to see if Steve was still in bed. He was. What the hell? Not knowing what to do, I shook him awake and tried explaining as best I could. I was so shaken up, I couldn't really explain myself properly though. Steve could see the terror in my face and knew something was wrong. He went to the front door and turned the light on. Looking out the window, he saw nothing. He also heard nothing. Whatever it was had moved on. Was I just imagining things? Steve came back to bed and comforted me. I gradually drifted back to sleep. In the morning, over breakfast, I explained what happened to him. As I told him the story, his face visibly paled.
When you were outside getting firewood and making the fire yesterday, I thought I heard you calling me from the bedroom,
he said.
I didn't say anything because I didn't want to worry you and make you think I wasn't enjoying myself.
I didn't know what to say. I wanted to make a possible reason, but something similar happened to me too. Maybe we were both just exhausted from the drive, and the day's activities was the best I could come up with. We both agreed to put it out of our minds and try to enjoy the day. We were going home tomorrow after all. We went out hiking again and noticed the distinct lack of other campers. As much as we tried to enjoy, it was hard to not feel uncomfortable. As we were hiking around the lake and small hill near the cabin, we both heard murmuring in the forest around us. It was in our voices too. We ended up cutting our planned hike short and heading back to the cabin. It was just too much. When we got back, we were torn between roughing it out and staying, or just cutting our losses and going home early. The decision was made for us when we both heard my voice outside towards the rear of the cabin saying indiscernible words. That was it. We hurriedly packed our car and left. I cannot express the terror of hearing our own voices, but not seeing the source. We returned the key and left without a word. The owner didn't even seem surprised. After that experience, I don't know if I will ever be able to convince Steve to go camping again. And I'm not sure I'd want to. I have experienced paranormal things since I was a child. I've always been open and receptive to paranormal things, and possibly to a fault. When I started dating my now husband, I would tell him all sorts of stories of things that I experienced through my childhood and teenage years. He has always been fascinated by the paranormal, and my stories always intrigued him, but he never experienced anything himself until we moved in together. I've always been convinced that I had a clinger spirit that had attached itself to me somewhere in life and just stayed along for the ride. We've lived in different locations and always experienced the same things at each home. It was never anything malicious, and I always joked that my Casper was just doing things to say hi and let me know he's there. My husband just laughed it off because there was never a real issue and everything seemed harmless and playful. We have walked into our offices with our desk chairs spinning when no one was in the room. We have smart TVs, and they all rotate turning on in the middle of the night, as if someone is trying to watch TV, scrolling through the apps to select Netflix or Hulu. I've also seen it just run through the different HDMI options. Items that have specific locations, like keys, will end up in random places, like under the kitchen sink or in a sock drawer. We shut our closet doors at night, and we will wake up with them wide open. I can't sleep if there's even a sliver of light showing in my room, and any light will wake me from a dead sleep. I wake up to the bathroom light switching on quite often, which requires me to get out of bed and turn it off so I can get back to sleep. My husband's computer powers on by itself, and it's a big tower with a power button that takes a little effort to push. We've become used to these things, but lately something else has started, and I think it's mimicking me. Lately, when I'm downstairs and my husband is in his office upstairs, he will walk to the landing of our stairwell and ask me if I call his name. Usually, if I need something or have a question for him, I will just call his cell if I'm too lazy to run upstairs or if I'm in the middle of cooking and can't leave the stove. Even when I'm laying down in bed and he's on his computer in the same room, he will pull off his headphones and ask me what I need. For a while, I was thinking, am I losing my mind? Am I actually saying something and not realizing it? He has stopped gaming midstream to come find me, aggravated that I am calling him. when I literally haven't said a word. Every time I tell him that I didn't say his name, he gets this confused look, like he's trying to read my face to see if I'm telling the truth. Yesterday was the turning point. I was laying in bed reading, and he threw a bottle of water on the bed next to me. I asked him why he brought me a bottle of water, and he said, "Do you not remember asking me for water?" I told him no, and pointed to a bottle of water on the nightstand that I brought to bed when I laid down. He said, "You literally just yelled down for me to bring you a cold bottle of water." I explained to him that I did not say that because I had my own cold water that I brought to bed. We both agreed that something really strange is happening because this has just started within the last month, and I don't know if this is my entity that has followed me, just now becoming vocal, or if this is something new. We're both of sound mind, and neither of us have any sort of mental issue that we're aware of that would have me speaking without knowing it, or him hearing things. Aside from extreme annoyance, is there a real cause for concern? Okay, so this was a couple of years back. I think around March or April of 2019. I had recently moved into a new apartment, eager to start fresh. Everything seemed normal until one evening when I noticed something a little strange. As I walked past my bathroom mirror, I caught a glimpse of someone behind me, an exact copy of myself. My heart raced as I turned around, but there was no one there. Shaken and unsure what I had seen, I did a thorough search of the house, but could find no one. Not really wanting to be alone that night, I called a friend to come over. Over the next few days, the sightings continued. What I now know was a doppelganger, mimicked my every move, always lurking in the reflection but never visible in physical space. I checked around on Reddit, seeking similar stories so I can get advice on what to do with it. I found many different stories of encounters with mirror doppelgangers, warning me of the potential dangers. As the days passed, the doppelganger grew bolder. It started to deviate from my actions, expressing a sinister smile when I looked terrified. Desperate for answers, I searched folklore and discovered that seeing one's own doppelganger was an omen of impending tragedy. Terrified, I reached out to a local paranormal expert. They conducted a cleansing ritual in my apartment, and it seemed to work. The mirror's reflection returned to normal, but the memory of that chilling encounter still keeps me up at night. Two instances of seeing my sister's doppelganger. First one happened several years ago. We have double doors leading into our living room that you can look through from the kitchen. We were both young at this time and pranked each other, so when I noticed her hiding in a small corner right behind the double doors, I called her out. "I know you're there, S. I can see you." She didn't move. All I can see is black hair and a white t-shirt. The corner is in shadows. I called her out again. "You're not going to scare me. I see you." I walked over and slammed the door back to reveal her. No one there. I went to her bedroom to ask her if she'd been in the living room just now, and she wasn't even wearing a white t-shirt, and no way did she have time to move all the way into her room and change clothes. The second incident happened just a few months ago. Same sister, but she has a kid now. They were living with us at the time, and my nephew liked to sleep with our parents. Around midnight one night, I hear my mum up to let the dogs out to pee. I go to the kitchen, again with the doors, yes, and I'm digging some cookies while talking with my mum. On the other side of the house, I hear my sister's bedroom door open, and I'm facing the living room doors. So I see, when she comes from the hallway leading to her room and crosses the living room towards our parents' room, Again, black hair and white t-shirt. I think to myself, what is she doing? And then quickly chalk it up to my nephew being in my parents' room and she's going to go get him. Not even 30 seconds later, I hear the bathroom door slam on the complete opposite end of the house. My sister got up to use the bathroom, not get my nephew, and I confirmed it was her in the bathroom. No one else was in the house but my parents, my sister, my nephew and me. But I know I saw someone clear as day walk through the living room that looked like my sister. To clarify, I was looking down when I heard the bedroom door. While I was looking down, my sister slipped by me to the bathroom. My mum saw her, and when I looked up, I saw the doppelganger. Then I heard the bathroom door. It happened very quickly. I asked my mum if that was my sister in the bathroom, and she said, yeah, which made me realize that I'd seen someone or something else walk by. I even went into my parents' room, but no one was there but my dad. My nephew was asleep in my sister's room. Have you ever seen a doppelganger before? I saw one once. Really, really scary. Alright, to start off, they say that once you see a doppelganger, the person whom the doppelganger imitates is doomed to either die very soon or come down with a serious accident. This is, of course, a myth, but I'm seriously freaked out now. Alright, to start off, I was lazily walking around Chinatown because I was bored and had nothing to do at home. Then, I noticed someone whom had the exact same clothes on as me, which was jeans, a long white sleeve, and black clothes. What was funny was that he had the same hairstyle as me, the short and spiky kind. I thought it was rather weird, so I tailed him. He seemed to know his way pretty well and stopped to browse some lady's clothing. I managed to get a glimpse of his face, and to my very surprise, he was me. He seemed to have noticed me because he looked at me straight in the eyes and grinned before disappearing into the crowds. I tried to follow him, but he simply vanished. I shrugged at that moment. Maybe I was just plain tired, which I was. So I decided to head back to Chinatown Point and catch a train home from there. As I was crossing the street, I saw him again. This time he was walking towards me, grinning all the while as I walked towards him. We stopped directly in front of each other. "What the hell?" I murmured, but he simply grinned and continued walking past me. I swore he brushed shoulders with me. He felt solid. That's when I realized the light was going red. I quickly dashed the remaining part of my journey across the road, when a speeding car brushed past me at a hair's breadth. I was so close that its side mirror managed to get a good swipe at my stomach. I just stood there, a little dumbfounded. The driver quickly got out of his car and apologized. I muttered it was nothing to worry about and just sat down. The driver wanted to make up for it, but I simply said I was fine. He left soon enough. I cautiously made the rest of my way back to my house. Only when I entered my room did I feel safe. I nearly could have gotten seriously injured or could have died. Just to let you know, it was a blazing 2 p.m. in the heat. Don't question why I was wearing long sleeves in that weather. I myself have no idea to my queer tastes. Question is, why did I see a doppelganger of myself? In my late 30s, I had a deep love for the ocean. I was a seasoned sailor, and my life revolved around the sea. It was during one of my solo voyages on a calm, moonlit night that I encountered something that, to this day, I still cannot explain. I was navigating my small sailboat through tranquil waters. The only source of light being the gentle glow of the moon and the stars. As I scanned the horizon, I saw a silhouette standing at the bow of my boat, perfectly mirroring my own stance. My heart raced as I stared at the figure. It was like looking at a reflection of myself, dressed in the same weathered sailor's gear that I wore. But there was something uncanny about the figure's expression. It was devoid of any emotion, and they made no move nor sound. I tried to call out, but my voice faltered. The silence of the open sea was punctuated only by the gentle lap of the waves against my boat. The figure remained unmoving, locked in an inexplicable connection with me. The minutes stretched into hours, and the figure showed no signs of life. It was as though they were an apparition, a mysterious stowaway on my vessel. The thought of an extra presence aboard my boat in the middle of the vast ocean was both unsettling and surreal. As the night wore on, I continued to sail, unable to tear my gaze away from the silent figure. There were no conversations, no explanations, just a shared, eerie connection between us. When dawn finally broke, the figure began to fade, dissipating like a dream upon waking. I was left alone with the early morning light, questioning my sanity and the nature of this inexplicable encounter. Only as the memory lingered did I consider the strangeness of the incident, realizing that the figure I saw had been more than just an illusion. Only years later, remembering this incident, I started searching the web for some answers. I came across some subreddits about doppelgangers, and it seems to fit the description. What do you think? Was this a doppelganger? Or was I just seeing things? Hello everyone. This experience occurred in February of the year of telling this, so my memory is pretty clear in regards to detail. This past year was my senior year of college, and I was thrilled to be living with an alumni of my sorority who I am very close with. We'll call her Abby for clarity's sake. Abby and I weren't actually supposed to live in the apartment we ended up in. We were originally going to be living in a townhouse with two other girls, but they started so much drama a month before we were supposed to move in that we had to contact our landlord to find a different place within their company to live. Thankfully, we found a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom basement apartment in a quiet area off campus. The first month was fine and without incident, but as the days went by, some strange things began to happen in the apartment. One morning, Abby woke up to a kitchen cabinet open. She wasn't that concerned about it and figured that I had just forgotten to shut it the night before. The next morning, a different cabinet was open, and once again, she shrugged it off. However, I went home one weekend, and she woke up to find every cabinet in the kitchen wide open and the sink running. Needless to say, Abby was scared and spent the night at her boyfriend's. 2 weeks later, we were watching TV and heard the bathroom door close. I tried to calm Abby down by saying that the fan we kept in the bathroom blew it closed. However, when we went to bed, we thought we could hear someone walking around in our living room. There's no way someone broke into our apartment and hid the whole day, only to come out at night and screw around with us. I was home the whole day, and Abby was home from 11 in the morning on. That incident took place shortly before Christmas break, and all was calm in the apartment until February. Abby had gone home for the weekend, and I was home alone, relaxing on the couch and doing homework. It was pretty late at night, so I turned on the TV for background noise and curled up on the couch to sleep. I woke up at 2:32 in the morning to see Abby walking through the front door, smiling but not saying anything. I blinked, still groggy from sleep, and asked if she was okay. She just looked at me and proceeded to take off her shoes and walk into the kitchen. Something about her didn't seem right. Like, this girl looked like Abby and walked like her, but it wasn't her. I asked her again if she was okay, because it was so early in the morning for her to be coming home. Abby looked at me, smiled, and began washing something in the sink. Something inside me felt a profound sense of dread, like I was in actual danger and I needed to get away. As quickly as possible, I went to my room and locked my door. My roommate followed me because I heard someone tapping their finger against the door. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. It just wouldn't stop. I didn't say another word because it felt like if I did acknowledge her, it gave her more strength. I know that doesn't make much sense, but that was my instinct. I curled up beneath my blankets and stared at my bedroom door, almost waiting for her to kick it in. My eyes felt heavy, and the tapping was almost like a metronome, enticing me to sleep. As I drifted back to sleep, the taps seemed to slow down to a trickle. The morning after, I was exhausted. It felt like I had taken 20 Advil PM to help me sleep, but I remembered everything that had happened last night. Cautiously, I left my room and saw that Abby's bed hadn't been disturbed or slept in. I went to the living room and her shoes and purse weren't there. A cold feeling crept into my spine as I sent her a text asking if she had come home that night. She responded that no, she hadn't, and wouldn't be coming home for another 2 days. But I checked the sink, and the bowl that Abby had been washing had been cleaned and put away. I firmly believed that I was not dreaming or hallucinating, and I know this wasn't some elaborate prank by Abby, because she would never do something like that. I firmly believe something took the shape of Abby that night, and that its intentions were not good. There were a few other experiences in that apartment, but nothing so dramatic as what I went through that night. I'm sorry if this post isn't very exciting or dramatic, but I thought it was worth sharing to get everyone's thoughts on it. Was this a doppelganger? My life had always been simple and predictable. I was an average person in my early 40s, working a regular office job and leading a quiet suburban life. That all changed one day while running errands in my hometown. I was at the local grocery store, pushing my cart down the familiar aisles, when I caught a glimpse of someone who looked exactly like me. It was as though I had stumbled into a parallel universe. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart racing. What I now know was a doppelganger, dressed in the same casual attire I was wearing, stood a few feet away, their gaze locked onto mine. There was no smile, no gesture, just a mirror image of myself. I blinked, hoping it was a figment of my imagination, but the doppelganger remained there, unmoving. Fear and confusion welled up within me. What did this silent twin want? Was this a sinister omen, or merely a bizarre coincidence? People around me continued shopping, oblivious to the uncanny spectacle before them. It was as though the world had frozen, and I was trapped in this surreal moment with my identical counterpart. I tried to step closer, but the doppelganger mirrored my movements exactly, maintaining a fixed distance. It was like facing a living reflection in a never-ending hall of mirrors. The minutes dragged on, but the silent standoff remained. I could feel the weight of the unspoken questions between us. Who were they? And why had our paths converged in this mundane grocery store? The doppelganger's blank expression offered no answers. We just continued staring at one another. Finally, a store employee seemingly unbothered by our strange encounter, approached me, asking if I needed assistance. I turned for just a moment to address them, and when I looked back, the doppelganger was gone, vanished, as silently as they had appeared. The experience had left me with an overwhelming sense of disquiet and the unshakable feeling that my life, once ordinary and routine, had been touched by something inexplicable. I never really believed in the paranormal or supernatural up until this point, but now I don't know what I believe. I did some searching after this encounter and came across many such encounters as my own. But what do you think? It was the 7th month in 2011, and as most of us call it, the Hungry Ghost Festival. It is during this time when many weird things might happen to the unwary, and many refrain from going out at night. But in my story, staying at home did not prevent one of the freakiest things in my life to occur. I was only 15 then, and all middle school students, like myself, would be tired when we get home. It was a usual day, and the smell of incense in the air was really strong that day, considering all the offerings being burnt. After a cold shower, I went to my nicely air-conditioned room and took a nice, long nap. At around 6:45, I heard knocking and saw my father coming into my room. He told me that he was home, and if I was hungry, we could go grab some dinner at the coffee shop near my HDB. He then left me to continue sleeping. At roughly 7:30, 45 minutes after my father came in, he came in again, and once again, to tell me he just got home. I found it rather odd and asked him why did he come in again. He looked at me with a shocked and surprised face and asked me what I meant. I told him that this was his second time in my room, and he denied ever entering my room and that he just got back from work. We then checked the surveillance recordings on my front door to see if an intruder could have come in or left between the time when we left till the time we got back. But the only people leaving were my parents and myself. No one else intruded or left our flat. I was completely freaked out by this incident and did not know what it meant or why it happened. I guess one of the free spirits probably mistook me for his son, and it was so lonely that he actually asked me to have a meal with him. This was a year or two back. I was in my late 20s at the time, an office worker, living and working in the bustling heart of the city. It was during one of the train rides to work that something strange happened. The train was crowded as usual, with people engrossed in their own worlds, staring at their phone, reading their books, oblivious to the outside world. I was absorbed in a book, trying to make the most of my daily journey. But then, as I looked up to check the station, I saw my own reflection, or so I thought. A man who looked exactly like me stood at the opposite end of the train car. He had the same clothes, the same posture, and even the same book in his hands. It was as though I was staring into a mirror. The only difference was that he was facing away from me, gazing out of the window. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the mind or some kind of coincidence. But as the train stopped at the next station and more passengers got off, I took a few steps towards the doppelganger. He turned around and our eyes met. There was no expression on his face, no acknowledgement of the uncanny resemblance. It was like he didn't recognize me, or perhaps he did and was as bewildered as I was. The train was too loud for us to speak, and yet there was a silent exchange of recognition and bewilderment. As the train journey continued, we both went back to our books, but I couldn't focus. I kept stealing glances at the silent doppelganger, and he did the same. It was like a dream, a surreal moment in an otherwise ordinary day. When my stop finally arrived, I gathered my belongings and made my way to the door, never taking my eyes off the doppelganger. He did the same, but neither of us made a move to leave the train. It was as though we were both anchored to the spot. The doors closed and the train started moving again, carrying me away from the doppelganger. I watched him recede into the distance, still holding my gaze. The last image I had was of his expressionless face, framed by the train window. I never saw him again, and I never got the chance to understand the meaning of that strange encounter. It left me with a sense of disquiet, and unsure of what I considered was real and what was not. This story happened to us way back when I was still 22 years old. I used to live with my boyfriend at the time, now hubby, in their old house at Villamor, Pasay City, Philippines. The house was just a bungalow type of house, but it was big enough to have 5 bedrooms, a living room, a dining room, and a restroom. It was just the 2 of us because his parents started to live in Pangasinan after my father-in-law retired as a soldier. So there was this particular day when we decided to buy some groceries, since he already got his salary. We went out and did what we had to do, and finally went home at around 12 p.m. We were so tired from all the buying and carrying of the groceries, plus the hot weather outside. So when we got inside the house, I went straight to our bedroom to change my clothes. But because I was feeling so hot, I thought of heading back to the living room to cool off right in front of the wall fan. As I was walking past our bedroom door, I saw a glimpse of my husband entering the bedroom beside ours. I wasn't thinking of anything fearsome back then, but when he didn't turn on the light, I started wondering, what the hell was he doing inside that other room? The door was also closed, and he was not answering me as I was calling his name. And, knowing my husband, he is not like that. So I finally decided to open the door, and I was so surprised to see the room empty. I walked backwards away from that room, and then saw my husband walking towards me from the kitchen. I asked him, "Where have you been?" And he told me that he was in the bathroom, taking a dump. I told him what happened, and he said that there really is a doppelganger in the house. Up to now, after the whole renovation of the house, there are still some incidents like this happening around the house. So, this all happened in my mid-20s. I was working from home at the time. My job luckily allowed for that during the pandemic. It was on one late August evening. I was working late one night at my home office, the soft glow of my desk lamp casting shadows. It was this night that I first noticed the figure in the hallway. A silent reflection of what looked like myself, dressed exactly as I was. The initial shock gave way to a surreal silence that lingered in the room. My eyes locked onto this replica of myself, standing motionless just beyond the threshold of my workspace. I stood up, and with hesitant steps, I approached, the unease settling in as I tried to reconcile the inexplicable presence. It wasn't just a visual doppelganger. It was as if I had stumbled upon a glitch in the Matrix or something. I don't really believe in that sort of thing, but I don't really have any other way to explain it. The air in the hallway took on a charged stillness, and the encounter became a disruption in the otherwise serene night. As I approached the figure, it turned and walked down the hallway. As I turned the corner to follow it, it had disappeared. Weeks later, it was early September. I was in the grocery store doing some after-work grocery shopping. I was strolling casually through the aisles, checking off things from my checklist. Turning into an aisle, I was met with the figure standing at the end. The silent observer amidst the shelves of everyday groceries. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights became a backdrop to the silent exchange, and a chill ran down my spine as my mind tried to comprehend what I was seeing again. Once again I tried to approach the figure. As I got about halfway towards it, it turned to the left and walked to another aisle. Once again I tried to follow it, but my attempt proved fruitless. I ran up and down the aisles, scanning each one, seeing if I could find it again, but nothing. The rest of the month was quiet. Then, around mid-October, I was walking my dog in the park one evening. The park is usually where I go to settle my mind after a hard day's work, but it became the backdrop for the next inexplicable encounter. As I walked along the tree-lined path, there it was, the silent reflection seated on a bench, my eyes fixed on it, and it became a moment frozen in time. My dog barely reacted to it. It seemed confused that there was two of me, but it didn't growl or anything like that. If anything, it moved behind me somewhat, a slight whimper. The rustle of leaves and distant chatter became the soundtrack to this encounter. I didn't try to approach it this time. This time I chose to go the other way on the path, away from the figure. It was a long time after that I saw the figure again. I thought I'd seen the last of it. There were more encounters than that, but these were the most significant, and they stood out the most. The encounters, initially frequent and vivid, began to shift towards the end of November. The figure's gaze grew more distant, and the sightings turned into fleeting glimpses, whereas before it would appear at the end of a hallway or aisle. By this time, it was appearing in the distance, perhaps on the horizon or amongst trees. Weeks passed, and the sightings dwindled. The once semi-regular occurrence became a rare sight, and then, as abruptly as it started, the encounters stopped altogether. It was a strange couple of months. I've read some stories online, and for the most part they're one-off sightings. Has anyone else been followed by their own doppelganger for this long before? If so, please let me know. I remember way back when I was still in high school, I was playing games on my computer when my mum opened up the door, peeked her head in, and told me she was home for lunch. So I literally thought nothing of it. Only thing I felt was off was the blue shirt she was wearing, which I'd never seen her wear before. But then again, I never cared much about those sort of details to begin with. Anyway, an hour goes by, and my mum opens up the door, and she peeks her head in and tells me she just went on lunch and wanted to know if I wanted to get some of her fries. I told her I'd just seen her an hour ago, and that she told me she was on lunch and how she was wearing a blue shirt, which, at this point, she was wearing a white shirt. She looked confused, and told me she hasn't been home all day since leaving to work, and that it was 1 p.m. when she usually takes lunch. I still don't know if that was a doppelganger or a spirit, or if I had like a weird mental moment. But I never got a scared feeling, nor an out-of-worldly presence from who I believed to be my mum. I've seen and heard a few stories. They aren't very creepy or anything, but to me they were. My dad woke me up once, shaking me awake and telling me to get up in a very urgent tone, which he rarely used. I didn't turn around to face him or anything. I just fell back asleep after hearing heavy footsteps walk off. I later woke up in a panic thinking I'd missed an appointment or something. He said he hadn't even left his room. The second time this happened, I woke up and felt like I was being watched. This time I opened my eyes and glanced over to the bathroom door, and my sibling was staring at me. They slowly moved over to the edge of the bed, like weirdly slow. I sat up and told them to go back to bed. That house was so creepy. I know they wouldn't head downstairs in the middle of the night, no matter what. I offered to bring them back up, but they didn't seem to register anything I was saying. So they sat down, and it was pretty much a wordless staring contest. Eventually, they left in that same saunter, and I wearily fell back asleep and asked about it in the morning. Yep, they never left their room upstairs. I barely slept while I lived in that house. It was always loud, and every night brought something different. Anytime I would sleep, I would be startled awake by something. The last one I can remember was my sister coming home, the front door opening and slamming, with her yelling up at us, saying she was home, before hearing her jog downstairs. She was supposed to be at work, so my mum and I exchanged glances. I went to go greet her. I looked everywhere. All the rooms were empty, and the house was quiet. The door never opened again, and everyone in the house at that time was upstairs. We messaged both her and my older sister, both of which were not home and never came home. I kind of wish I got to see what opened the door. Everyone in the house heard it, so that one I can confirm wasn't brought on by sleep-deprived hallucinations. Weird stuff, really. The first two happened at my grandma's house, where one person passed away. The second was in our old home. Maybe it was the house that was haunted, but for whatever reason, I saw my husband's doppelganger at least twice while we lived there. The first time was after I drove him to work. It was a 45-minute drive each way, and I was just getting back home. When I pulled up in front of the house, there he was, standing on the porch, smoking a cigarette. Same black hat and red shirt he had on when I dropped him off. I looked away for a second to put the car in park, and when I looked again, he was gone. I hopped out of the car and looked on either side of the house for him. I was so confused. I called and asked him where he was. Obviously, he was still miles away at work. I thought I was going crazy. The second time, I was not alone. We had a friend of ours over at the house, who I'll refer to as W. W and I were hanging out in the kitchen, eating munchy food, and my husband was outside for whatever reason, I forget. Before I continue, the house was set up like this. The kitchen is the first room you walk into from the front door / front porch. It's the only room on the bottom floor. There's a set of wooden stairs in the kitchen that leads upstairs to the rest of the house. In front of the house is the main road, so you have to walk off the porch onto the sidewalk and around to the side of the house to get to the yard. Okay, so we're both in the kitchen, but I'm leaning over the counter eating leftover halapukis, and W is at the kitchen table facing the door. My husband bursts through the door and runs through the kitchen, slamming the door shut behind him. I only see him out of my periphery. After a second, W says to me, "Where did he just go?" And a chill goes up my spine. I turn around, and he's not there. I don't even bother checking the stairs because they're very loud, and I would have heard him. I knew what it was. I say to W, that wasn't him, and go towards the door to check outside and prove to both of us that he was still out there. This is where it gets hilarious. W grabs the back of my shirt, terrified, and yells, "Don't open the door." I bravely open the door and yell for my husband, who responds, "Yeah?" and comes walking around the house from the side yard. Our simple friend then says to him, "Dude, someone just ran into your house," causing my husband to go into attack mode, running into the house searching for the intruder. I know this is ridiculous, because W didn't act as if a stranger ran into the house when we were in the kitchen. In fact, I think he even said something to him before asking me where he went. I stop them both and say, "Wait a minute. W, what did you see?" And he looks at my husband and says, "I saw you." At that moment, we all realized what happened. We saw something supernatural. We were thoroughly freaked out, and W refuses to talk about it to this day. This happened about 13 years ago, when I was around 6 or 7 years old. I'd like to start off and set the scene. My parents were not religious, and at this point in time, I hadn't been exposed to much religious subject matter, nor did I actually believe people could die. My father also used to work at night, since he was the only one able to work due to my mum's declining health, both physically and mentally. We lived in a rented 2-story house, where the kitchen looked out into an open living room. That night I was sitting on the counter as my mum was feeling well enough to pour me some milk and just in general bond with me before I went to bed, only to head to school the next morning. There was absolutely nothing weird about that day or night besides what happened. As she was pouring me milk, I was looking out into the living room, just sitting and waiting, when I turned my head and saw my dad standing there. I remember how confused I was, because not a moment before, I was just looking there, and then another moment, he's standing there. I didn't think it was too strange at first, because it was my dad. I expected him to approach or say something, but he never did. He just stood there and stared at us, arms at his side, just looking at us. He didn't blink once. His expression was completely neutral, but his eyes were just opened enough that I could see across the room. He was staring at us. It was weird at first, just waiting for him to say something to me, but he never did. He just stood there, and I kept staring back, and it started to scare me, especially when the longer I looked at him, the more just wrong he looked. His eyes were too small. It looked like him, just kinda off. He stood there long enough that I started rubbing my eyes and blinking, thinking I was seeing things. But he just kept standing there, unmoving, until after one of my blinks, he just disappeared. That's what scared me more than anything. With how the room was laid out and how creaky the floors were, for him to have even moved as fast as he did, he'd have had to open one of the doors next to him and slam it shut for it to be possible for him to just disappear as fast as he did. There was no way he could run away that fast, especially with how open the living room was. I didn't notice it when he first appeared, but our floors creaked loudly every time someone walked around, even if they were as light-footed as they could be. I refused to go over to that area for the remaining few months before we moved after my mum took her own life unrelated to the incident, which I discovered after writing up the original version of this. I would have chalked this up to being my mind playing tricks on me if my mum hadn't also told my dad about this experience. I never said a word to my mum. I only looked at her, and I thought she didn't see it, but looking back, I'm pretty sure I saw her turn and also look, not long after I started staring at whatever it was. I only found out many years later my mum had seen it when I was telling my dad about the experience, and he mentioned she told him. But because my mum had a history of being mentally ill, it was brushed off. The experience really scared me to the point that I started to sleep with the lights on until about a few years ago. I've thankfully never seen anything quite like it since, so hopefully that stays the case. This happened more than 13 years ago in my old childhood home. This is just the first of 3 incidents that occurred when I was a kid and in my late teens. This happened to my brother. So for context, my house was very much haunted and weird stuff happened all the time. I could go on, but that's for another time. Me and my brother shared one room, and our parents' room was right next to ours. There was a long hallway in front of our room that led to the kitchen. The hallway took a sharp right turn, and you'd end up in the kitchen. Even during daytime, this hallway was dark and dimly lit, but the kitchen had windows and was usually brightly lit during daytime. On this particular day, me and my brother were just chilling in our room. I was on my bed reading a book, and my brother was on the PC. After a while, he left the room and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. He came back with a concerned look on his face. He asked me if I had been in the kitchen when he was there, and I said no. I was just in the room, reading my book. What he told me next still gives me chills. According to him, he opened the fridge to grab a snack, and when he looked up, he saw me standing at the kitchen doorway. He called out my name. I didn't respond and just stared at him with a blank expression on my face. He thought I was just trying to mess with him, so he chuckled to himself and told me to cut it out. But I still didn't respond, and now I had this weird grin on my face. So he just started walking up to me, and I started running from the hallway towards my room. When he walked out of the kitchen to catch up with me, I was gone. He thought it was weird, but just assumed that I ran into the room. He asked me repeatedly because he genuinely thought I was messing with him. I reassured him that I was not in the kitchen at that time. We were both freaked out and just felt weird the entire day. We decided never to talk about it again. I blocked this out of my memory, and reading the stuff here reminded me of this incident. This is the second encounter I had with my doppelganger. This is the only time I saw this entity with my own eyes, and it still creeps me out to this day, 11 years later. This happened back in December 2011, close to Christmas Day. I was on vacation with my family. We stayed in a small 2-story house in a gated community. A family friend of ours let us stay at this house since they had moved abroad years ago. The house had 3 rooms, 2 upstairs and 1 room downstairs facing the kitchen. I stayed in one of the upstairs rooms with my mum, 3-year-old sister and my older brother. I was 11 at the time, so I still remembered this incident clear as day. Like I mentioned earlier, this was a gated community, so it was usually very quiet at night. And apart from the lights from the houses and the street lights, it got pretty dark. For context, I've never been afraid of the dark. I've always believed in ghosts, spirits and stuff like that since I was raised religious. And I always prayed before going to bed. I still do occasionally, mostly out of habit, but I'm not that religious anymore. But the idea of encountering a ghost never scared me, due to my childhood home being haunted. My parents, my siblings, all encountered ghosts there, but I had never seen an apparition or anything of the sort up until this point. I did hear the occasional footsteps, doors being opened and closed, weird noises, you know, the cliche stuff. This happened one night after the usual day of shopping and sightseeing. We came home pretty late, and I went to bed around 11 p.m. I slept on a mattress next to the bed with my head next to the foot of the bed. There was a small cupboard directly in front of the mattress. I'm pointing this out for later, as it's important for the context of the story. I got up around 3 a.m. to go to the bathroom. I'm a very light sleeper, so even if I wake up during the middle of the night, I won't be half asleep or anything like that. I was wide awake when I went into the bathroom and got out. I picked up my blanket to lie back down, and as I did, my eyes landed on where the cupboard was, and I just froze. Literal chills ran down my spine. There, sitting cross-legged directly where the cupboard was this figure of a young boy, about my age and size. I looked closely and observed him. I noticed that he wore the same pajamas that I was wearing. The same hair, same t-shirt, same everything. Then I realized that I was literally staring at myself. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My body just completely froze up, and I almost fell backwards. When my voice finally came out, I just screamed for my mum. She woke up and quickly turned the lights on. She had a puzzled look on her face and asked me what was wrong. I couldn't speak and just pointed at the cupboard. And there it was. The cupboard was back to where it was supposed to be. No more apparition. Whatever I saw had completely vanished into thin air. I was able to go back to sleep that night, but it did take me some time. I slowly fell back asleep, all the while staring at the cupboard. Whatever I saw that night, I still can't give a logical explanation to it. I'm glad that at least my family believes me. Since I've never been afraid of the dark, I was never the type of kid that made weird shapes in the dark and got scared. For the longest time, I just brushed it off as my imagination as I got older. Mainly because this was just too scary for me to remember. Until my mum encountered the same entity years later. So now I know with absolute certainty that I didn't imagine this. I live in a relatively small town, and recently, something strange has been happening. People have been saying that there's kind of a twin of mine, a ghostly double, wandering around the town. The weird part? I've never seen this twin, even though everyone else seems to have. It started with people telling me stories about meeting me in places I'd never been. Sally, who works at the bakery, swears she saw me staring at her from a distance at the farmer's market. The thing is, I wasn't anywhere near the market that day. I was at work. The stories got weirder. Co-workers talked about me reading at the park, but I'm more of a stay-at-home and watch TV kind of guy. These stories have turned into a big deal, and now people I don't even know approach me, convinced they've seen me before, when I'm pretty sure they hadn't, at places I'm sure I hadn't been. So we decided to play detective and check out the places where this doppelganger supposedly showed up. As we walked around the town at night, there was a strange feeling in the air, like something was about to happen, and then it did. The doppelganger appeared, standing right in front of me, copying everything I did. It was like I was looking into a mirror. It was a surreal moment, like meeting a stranger who knows everything about you. As everyone scattered, the twin faded away, leaving me confused and concerned. The stories of my unseen double still linger, but they're starting to die off. I'm wondering what the hell it was. Has anyone else experienced something similar? We recently moved into a big house in a small village near the city. The house had 2 floors, and the rooms were downstairs and the living area upstairs. At the living room, we had this 10-meter long balcony door that you could see all the way to the city, as we were the first house of the village. So one night, around 7 p.m, I was sitting with my mum watching TV on the couch. My father was taking my 2 sisters to gymnastics practice. I like to watch the cars leaving towards the city and disappearing into the distance, so that's what I did with my father's car. After a while, I turned again towards the TV. A few minutes passed by, and I clearly heard my little sister giggling loudly from downstairs. I was horrified, as I had just saw my sisters getting into the car and leaving with my father. However, the TV was loud, and I reassured myself that it was a sound from the TV probably. Then I see my mum standing up and reaching for the TV remote, and she asked me if I heard my sister giggling. I told her that I did, and together we went towards the stairs. Then my mum called my sister twice with no reply. We stood there for 10 seconds, and everything was quiet. All of a sudden, we both hear my father screaming, "Hey!" My mum ran to the kitchen and called my father and asked him where they were. He replied that they just arrived at the city. My mum then grabbed a golf club, and together we went downstairs, as we thought it was probably a robber taunting us. We searched every inch of the house, inside wardrobes and under beds. No one was there. This happened in the middle of winter, and all the windows were closed, so this wasn't someone from outside. So, you know those stories where the kid hears stuff that's not there, and everyone thinks it's just a wild imagination? Yeah, well, that was my life. Except it wasn't my imagination. It was real. Too real. We moved to an old house when I was about 12, the kind that screams for a paint job. At first it was cool, big enough to have my own space. But then, the place started messing with us. Mainly with me. Mum and Dad were out a lot, working shift jobs, you know. It cued whatever it was in our house to start its party. I'd be gaming in my room and I'd hear my dad call,
"Ben, let the dog out,"
from downstairs. Only thing, we didn't have a dog. And Dad wasn't home. Or late at night, I'd wake up to my little sister, Ellie, crying out. Man, the first few times I nearly tripped over myself rushing to check on her. She was always dead asleep, sleeping like a baby, not a single sign of distress. As the years passed by, it became background noise. Mum asking for help with the groceries, my sister calling out to me in the night. Echoes of our daily life, but off, like a scratch CD. My friends didn't like the feel of the house. A few came once and never came back. They'd hear their laughs, their own voices, while they were playing video games silently. They thought we were pranking them, like my whole family was in on it together. We weren't. We sort of just lived with it, until this one night before my 18th birthday changed everything. The folks were at some dinner, and outside one hell of a storm was brewing. Thunder, lightning, the works. Then it started. The freak show. Shouts, cries, whispers, all downstairs. Full-on family drama, but in surround sound. And let me say, we're not like that at all. That was it, the final straw. Once the storm calmed and the house went quiet, it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to pop. We couldn't do it anymore. A few weeks later, the moving trucks were outside. The old house didn't make a peep that day. We drove off, and I swear I saw the curtains twitch, like it was saying goodbye or maybe just messing with me one last time. Years later, I asked my parents about it, why we suddenly moved out. And they told me they were experiencing the same things as I was, but they didn't want to add to my fear, so They played it off like it was my imagination. So there you go. My life, aged 12 to 18, featuring ghostly surround sound. One thing's for sure, it was a childhood I'll never forget. I'm no storyteller, and I tend to keep to myself, but what my family and I went through this summer, well, it's not really something you just keep inside. We're just your average family of 4. My husband, Carter, our 2 kids, Lily and Nolan, and myself. We decided to rent an old cabin in the woods, something rustic, to get away from the city buzz. The first couple of days were picture perfect. You'd almost expect a fairy tale to unfold in that charming clearing. Then, the fairy tale twisted. We started hearing things. It began with the kids. Lily came up to me one morning at breakfast, confusion lacing her small face. "Why are you whispering my name, Mummy?" But I hadn't called her. I put it down to kids playing tricks on each other. Until I kept hearing Carter call out to me. It's eerie hearing your name spoken in your husband's voice, coming from the shadowed tree line when he's right beside you, chopping wood. It scratches at your nerves.
That wasn't me,
he said, but his eyes were clouded with concern. He didn't have to tell me. I could see he heard it too. Things got weirder fast. Laughter echoed around us in the evening. Laughter that mimicked my children's laughter, down to the last giggle. But they'd be sitting there, quiet, fear in their eyes, huddled by the fire. I'd catch murmurs, my own voice discussing plans, day-to-day things, when I hadn't said a word. It was as if the forest around us listened, learned, and then tossed our own names back to tease us or taunt us. We secured the doors. We stayed close. But the voices, our voices, crept under the doors and through the walls at all hours. I was no longer certain if Carter's calls for help were from him or from something else. Nolan, my brave little man, tried to rationalize it. He said it was just echoes, reflections, or someone playing a nasty joke. But there's only so much you can explain away when the voice of your daughter pleading for help pulls you out into the dark night. And she's not there. She's inside, asleep and safe. Our nerves were frayed at the edges. By the time we heard an angry shouting match erupt between Carter and myself in the yard, while we were both inside, silent and sipping tea, the decision was made. The kids were terrified. Carter was on edge, and I couldn't handle the forest speaking back anymore. We packed in haste, abandoning the fairy tale for safety of the familiar. Our car pulled away, leaving behind the whispers and cries that sounded all too human, all too much like the family we knew ourselves to be. I don't know what to make of it all. I don't even have a name for it. But something in those woods knows us too well. We came back home sooner than expected, to the mundane sounds of city life, thankful for every honking car and yelling neighbor. Whatever it is, doesn't seem to have followed us, except in our minds, where it still echoes. Thanks for listening. Maybe someone else has had a similar experience and can share what they think it is. Hey there. Never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here we are. My name's Mike, and my partner, Jenna, and I moved into a duplex earlier this year. You always hope the move comes with an upgrade in life, don't you? But what we got wasn't listed in the brochure. We loved the place at first glance, a proper home with those small quirks that scream potential. But not long after settling in, that potential turned peculiar. It began subtly. Jenna's got this melody she hums when she's busy around the house. It's a nice tune. I have no idea what it is, but it always made the place feel more alive. One evening, I'm down in our little DIY basement workshop, and I hear Jenna's humming from upstairs. Figured she was home early from her friend's place, so I dropped my tools, and head up for the usual welcome back chat. And what do I find? A quiet, empty house. No Jenna. Her car not in the drive. Nothing. I ring her up and sure enough, she's still across town, and no, she wasn't in the house humming that tune. Odd, right? Well, that was just the prelude. The next event really shook us. I wake up one night to the sound of Jenna talking in the living room, clear, as if she was sitting right there on the sofa. I'm thinking she's on the phone, maybe walking around to talk. But that doesn't sit right because it's past midnight. I get out of bed, walk into the living room. No Jenna, no phone call. Just the dark and the silence that fills it as soon as I switch on the light. Now, I'm not superstitious. I don't really put much thought into the paranormal. But I tell you, my skin was prickling. Jenna wakes up to find me all pale, wandering the house. I explain it to her, and she's all rational about it, suggesting maybe I dreamed it up, half asleep and all. I almost buy it. Until it happened to her as well. One afternoon I'm out for groceries, and Jenna hears me calling out to her from the bedroom, asking for help with fixing something. It spooked her good because she had just texted me and knew I was out and about. She checks the bedroom, and of course, it's empty. That's when we start piecing it together. Something around here is mimicking us, and it's damn good at it. It's not threatening, you see, but it's invasive, like a violation of our private selves. It went on. My whistling, her singing, even snippets of our own conversations whispered back to us in the dead of night. We've heard of hauntings, but this is something else. We reached out to the landlord, tried to dig a bit into the history of this duplex. All he could give us was a shrug and a sorry, a story about tenants who left too fast, and nothing to explain why. We were left with a choice: keep living in this echo chamber or bail. But we're not quitters and we're not victims. We stand our ground, our own skepticism as our shield. So that's our story. We joke now that at least we're never really alone, even when we are. But we have an unspoken agreement. When we hear each other without seeing, we don't follow the sound. I've done some searching online and found the topic of mimics. Could this possibly be a mimic? And if so, are we in danger? Let me know. So this happened to me last September, and is one of the scariest events in my life so far. It is also why I will always choose to not stay at anyone else's place anymore, even if that means I need to pay for my own Uber. It was a warmish night. We had gone out to celebrate Becca's 22nd birthday. After a great night out at a club and a few too many shots, we all decided to call it a night. Being the person who lived the farthest, and also the person who drank the most, it was decided that I should crash at Becca's place on the couch. I don't remember the ride there, or walking into her apartment. All I remember is collapsing onto Becca's couch with all the grace of a fallen tree. My head was spinning so fast I could swear I was on a merry-go-round. Becca tossed me a blanket, making a comment about it being cloud soft or something. But I barely felt it. Becca murmured her good night, her voice fading as she retreated to her bedroom. I just lay there, slowly succumbing to sleep. It wasn't long before the stillness of the house began to stir again. Only this wasn't the familiar shuffle of my friend returning to fetch a forgotten phone. It was a creeping whisper, slithering out of the dark, dressed in the tones of my friend.
Hey Laurie, come here. You gotta see this.
The voice taunted from the dark hallway. I squinted into the dark. Becca, that you? My voice was a distorted record, slow and wary. But there was no reply. I glanced at my phone and the time said 3:07 a.m. Something about that time made the darkness somehow feel alive. I texted Becca, a lazy reassurance to my unease. "You okay?" Her reply was swift. "In bed. What's up?" I replied, "Nothing," and just tried to dismiss the incident, trying once again to let sleep take me. Yet, as the silence settled like dust, I spotted it. A figure, barely visible. A smudge in the darkness that could have been Becca. But it quivered oddly, like a glitch in reality. I rubbed my eyes to look again, thinking maybe something was stuck in them. And it was gone. Then I heard it.
"Laurie, you okay?"
It said my name. I could have sworn it was Becca's voice. Was I hearing things? It then repeated,
"Laurie, you okay?"
but this time, it sounded like it was at the front door. Again I whispered into the darkness, "Becca?" and added, "This isn't funny." All the while looking around me to see if I could see anything else. Then,
"This isn't funny,"
could be heard from the kitchen, the entrance of which was directly across from my feet. Again, it was Becca's voice. But how did she get from the front door to the kitchen so fast, without me seeing or feeling her pass me? I was statue still, a scream in my throat that I just couldn't let out. It felt like forever that I lay there frozen like that. I guess I must have passed out eventually, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming in through the gaps in the curtains. It was morning. The sunlight, although it hurt my eyes, was reassuring. I quickly gathered up my things and got ready to leave. I didn't want to spend another minute there. I woke Becca up and told her I needed to leave. I made up some half-assed excuse about my family needed me for something that day. She called me an Uber and sat and waited with me until I was picked up. I didn't tell her about my experience. I wasn't ready to relive it yet, and my hangover made it hard to formulate the words. I told her the full story later that day after I had recovered somewhat. She was shocked and said she had never had anything like that happen in her apartment before, but she had only been there barely a month. I have no idea what that was, and I truly hope my friend never experiences it. One thing's for sure though, I will never crash at a friend's place again.
This happened when I was in high school. I don't exactly remember how old I was, but I know I was a teenager. I am part of a family of 9. Yeah, it's a big family. We lived together in a detached house at the time. I don't really know how to cut to the chase in any other way other than saying, in a family that size, it's inevitable that there is a queue sometimes for the bathroom in the morning. 7 a.m. in my house was like Shinjuku Station during rush hour sometimes. It was always busy, but we lived with it. It was just our lifestyle. One night during dinner, my mum said something a little strange. She said that morning the light in the bathroom was on and she needed to use it. So she called out to see if anyone was in there, and someone replied, "Yeah." My mum said that she wasn't sure if it was my younger brother or my little sister, so she called out both of their names to see if she could find out. She waited a while, but no one replied. She said that she was a little concerned by that silence, so she went to unlock the door. When she opened the door, she said that she couldn't believe her eyes. The bathroom was empty. No one was in there, but she said she was adamant that she heard one of our voices coming from the bathroom. I wasn't surprised when she told me she got the chills after that experience. Of course, my dad shook it off and said that she must have been imagining or hearing things. I guessed that could be a possibility. We lived in a noisy home, and when it was quiet sometimes, it just didn't sound or feel right. I suppose that sounds a little weird, but it's true. Some of my siblings agreed with my dad. They said that it could have been street noise, the neighbor's dog, or the TV being on in another room. I allowed them to sway me, and I changed my mind. And then, after a couple of days, I kind of forgot about it. One morning, a little while later, I was getting ready to go to school, and I needed the bathroom. It was just a standard morning in the family of 9. I saw the light on in the bathroom, so I called out, "Is someone in there?" or something like that. Then, alongside the noise of a newspaper being unrolled, I hear my father's voice say, I thought to myself, why are you reading a goddamn paper in there? You know how busy it is in the morning. So I rattled the door handle and told him to hurry up. However, when I rattled the door, it slowly opened. It wasn't locked. The door opened to reveal an empty bathroom. I was really creeped out by that sight. I was freaking out because I could have sworn that I heard my dad in there. I feel as if I could pass a lie detector on that too, because in my mind, it was so clear. I was certain that he was in there. Only, he wasn't. I don't know what to do, so I quickly left the house. I didn't want to use the bathroom at home that day, and I decided to use the one at school. I couldn't believe the same thing that happened to my mum happened to me. I'm sure I was not hearing things. I'm sure it wasn't street noise or the TV. And I know it wasn't the neighbor's dog making that noise. Later that night, while we were all having dinner, I mentioned what happened that morning to my family. My sister was the most shocked, because she said that she had heard my father's voice in the bathroom directly after I left for school. That just freaked me out even more. It was seriously weird. There was something in our house that was trying to mimic the voices of my family members by the sound of things. I don't know how else to explain it. It happened on a bright morning in a family home that had had no history, as far as I know, of paranormal activity. It really creeped me out, and I don't know what that was. I still live at home, but I will be looking to move out as soon as I can. I have heard voices in the night coming from across the hall that sound like my siblings talking in quiet conversations, and sometimes I can't get to sleep because I don't know if I'm listening to my brothers and sisters muttering at night, or if it's something else. One time when my daughter and I first moved into my house, it was a weekend and she asked me to go to her friend's house and play. Because it was 8 a.m. on a Saturday, I told her sure, got her coat together, gave her some money, said goodbye, and she left. I went back to sleep for a couple of hours, and then woke up and started cleaning like I always do on weekends. I was in the bathroom, cleaning the toilet with my music on, and suddenly I hear the front door open and close. I just assumed it was my daughter, and was assured it was when I see the blur of her pink winter coat walk by the bathroom door. It was a fluffy ski coat, so I heard it too. In passing, I say, "Hey, what are you doing home?" She didn't answer me, so I just assumed she didn't hear me. She was in the room for maybe 30 seconds, and I saw her walk back by the bathroom. I asked her if she was leaving again. She didn't answer. I said louder, "Be home before supper. I love you." And she said I love you too, and closed the door. I realized that I had trash I could have her take out to the trash can while she was home. So I went to the front door to catch her, and realized that her house key lanyard was on the table beside the door, and the deadbolt was locked. My house key on my car keychain was on the table too, but the deadbolt that has to be locked with a key from the outside was locked. I opened the door to look outside, and no one was there. I kind of thought that maybe she just stayed home, so I looked around the house for her. She wasn't anywhere to be found. I checked the back door, and the deadbolt was locked there too. When I called her, she told me she was playing with her friend and that they had been building a snowman all day. I asked her if she'd been home, and she said no. I asked her again if she was playing a joke on me, and she said no. She didn't take her house key, but didn't think of it as a big deal because I would be home when she got home and could let her inside. I still couldn't figure out how she locked the deadbolt, so I asked her that. She told me that she had locked the bottom lock only. At this point, she was starting to get scared, so I played it off as a misunderstanding and told her I loved her and I would see her when she got home. I still don't know who that was who walked by the bathroom door, and I have no clue who or what locked that deadlock without the key. The only two keys that exist to unlock our doors were sitting on the table right by our door. To this day, I still believe it was my daughter's doppelganger. We had many experiences in that house with ghosts after that day. It got bad enough at one point that I purchased a bigger bed because my daughter wouldn't sleep in her room without me. We eventually moved, and I blame it partially on that damn house. I was never really scared, but my daughter was, and it was really a helpless feeling. This happened last year, around September. I was sick at the time. I was off from school, stuck at home with the flu, and feeling like absolute garbage. Everyone else was out. Mum was at work, Dad was on a business trip, my sister was at school, and I was trying to get some rest in my room. I left the door open because, moving around felt like running a marathon, so I took a nap. Because what else can you do when you're in that state? When I woke up, the house was super quiet, and then I thought I could hear a kind of shuffling from down the far end of the hall. The sound of footsteps started getting closer and closer. I didn't think much of it until I saw my mum walk right past my door. As she walked past, she was looking right at me, unblinking, directly into my eyes. But she didn't stop to check on me or anything. Then it happened again, like 5 minutes later. The same thing. She walked by, held eye contact, and kept going. I figured she was home from work, but it freaked me out because I thought, why isn't Mum saying anything? I grabbed my phone to text her, and that's when I saw the time. It was only 11:15 a.m. And there it was, a text from my mum, asking if I needed anything from the store, because she was going to the supermarket after work. I was seriously creeped out. The rest of the day nothing else happened, but I couldn't shake off what I saw. I also couldn't rest much after that, and closed my door immediately. Later on that evening, I told my mum and my sister what had happened. I thought they'd say I was just seeing things because of the fever, but they both got really quiet. They both told me that they had seen something like that before too. My sister seeing my mum, and my mum seeing my dad. We couldn't figure it out, and even though nothing like that happened again, we still talk about it sometimes, trying to make sense of it. We moved out of that house a couple of months after this, and nothing else ever happened. I was taking a nap during the day, and I woke up to my husband standing beside my bed. Why I woke up at that particular moment, I don't know. Strangely enough, he was drinking a 20-ounce bottle of soda and shaking his hips back and forth as if to say, "Haha, I have a soda and you don't." Like a child would, I suppose. Immediately, I became aggravated and sat up and yelled, "Lewis, go away and leave me alone." As I watched, fully awake and right before my eyes, my husband started to disappear from the feet up in a fashion that looked digital. I began to be able to see that he was made up of little squares, and they were quickly disappearing from his feet up until he was completely gone. I have never been so freaked out in all of my life. The other thing about this vision was that it was completely, deathly silent. There was no sound at all, and it was almost like there was a vacuum, or as though the thing itself made everything around it even more silent. For example, my fan that was beside my bed didn't seem to be making a sound. I immediately went upstairs and called him on his cell. He was, and had been all day, in Alabama, working. He is a railroad supervisor. The things I know for sure are, 1. That thing was not my husband. 2. I was definitely awake and not dreaming because I went directly upstairs after seeing it. And 3. I know the everyday term for these things are doppelgangers. I want to know more. What exactly is behind a doppelganger? What or who is it that makes them occur? Also, if anyone is an expert on these things, I'd be interested to know why I chose to imitate my husband, and why the dorky, childish soda dance. I've seen paranormal things in the past, but to me, evidence of a ghost makes sense. You know what they are, and pretty much where they come from. But this thing is just too bizarre to me. What creeps me out the most, though, I wonder how long it stood over me while I was sleeping, before I sensed it and woke up and saw it. I have a friend who's really into this occult kind of stuff. I don't know if she practices anything or her habits around it. I just know she likes strange things. She likes to buy antiques and even has an old lamp from a dead lady's house. She was a little strange, but I've known her since she was young, so that stuff didn't bother me. We stopped talking for a number of years because we were growing up and going to different schools, etc. But she randomly messaged me one summer and asked how I was doing. She invited me to do a little get-together, and we caught up. I learned that she was sensitive to spirits and didn't think too much about it then. After spending some time with her, I invited her to my house for a sleepover. We were laying in bed. We shared the same bed, just chatting and stuff before sleeping. The lights were off, and we were just giggling, talking about random stuff. All of a sudden she hides under the blankets and is terrified. I ask her, what's wrong? She tells me that she sees a man at the end of the bed and asks me to check. I look and see nothing there. I tell her I don't see anyone. She kind of gets quiet and didn't really talk much for the rest of the night. I shook it off and thought maybe she was just tired and decided to get some sleep myself. As I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear this creepy whispering. It was indistinguishable, but lasted for minutes. And it kind of freaked me out, so I put a pillow over my ears and tried to reason it as just white noise or my ears ringing. But it was just freaking creepy. The next morning I get up to use the bathroom. She's still sleeping. I use the bathroom in the hallway and leave the door slightly ajar because I was too lazy to close the door. I see this man, looks like my grandfather who lives with me, dressed in white, walk past the door once. Then, a few seconds later, walks past the door again, towards my parents' room, and I hear the door shut. Now, my grandpa hardly ever goes into my parents' room, so that was already sketchy. And it was weird that he was kind of hovering back and forth like that. I was so sketched out, I walked straight out of the bathroom, not even turning off the lights, and trudged over to my parents' room. I see absolutely no one in there except my dad snoring away, wearing a black shirt. I check the closet. I check their bathroom. Nothing. Also, my parents' room is at the very end of the hall, so there are no stairs and no way to exit. So nobody could have gone past me, walking towards my parents' room, without me 100% running into them. I run downstairs. It's about 10 a.m. at this point, and I ask my mum where my grandpa is. Turns out he's been out all morning at an appointment. I asked her if she'd been upstairs in the past 5 minutes. She says she's been downstairs since 7 a.m. I'm obviously freaked out by this point. My friend walks down and I tell her everything that happened. You know what she says? She goes, "Oh, him. I give her a puzzled look. She explains to me that ever since her get-together, I brought him with me, and that he hasn't left her alone since. She also mentioned that the more I hang out with her, the more I'll see things. I noped the heck out of there. Haven't seen her since, although we do still text here and there sometimes. Never saw him again. I have had a few odd experiences throughout my life, but nothing that I would necessarily label as paranormal. At least, not until recently. Full disclosure, I love watching specials about the paranormal. I enjoy reading books about supposedly true hauntings, as well as movies about ghosts, demons, etc. That being the case, I am familiar with some of the classic telltale signs of a location that is purportedly haunted. Bad smells, vertigo, cold spots, whispers, etc. But again, taking into account what I know about those things, and considering it is a hobby of sorts to read about them, nothing paranormal has ever happened to me. That all changed a couple of weeks ago, when I started dating a woman I met while at my job. I had not dated in a very long time. Divorced, single dad, pushing 40, a little thick around the waistline, etc. So it was a surprise that someone as young and pretty as she was asking me out. She's 26, but I do look much younger than my age. We hadn't gone on that many dates, maybe 3 or 4 over the course of a few weeks. So even though we communicated a lot via texts, email, Facebook, etc., we actually had not spent very much time together. So I was taken off guard that she asked me to help her out with a family matter. Her grandmother, who had been living on her own private property in a camper for 20-some odd years, just her and a lot of cats. My girlfriend, I use that term loosely because, again, we were still just getting to know each other, was one of the few members of her family that still made any effort to visit her grandmother, and described her as very eccentric, solitary, and somewhat spiteful. Recently though, her mind seemed to be going. On the rare occasions that anyone went to see her, the consensus was that she had basically gone senile, and nothing she said made any sense anymore. So they made the decision to put her in a nursing home, which is where I came in. My girlfriend, who I will call Trish, needed me to help her clean out her grandmother's camper, save anything that was worth keeping and dump the rest. So we rented a flatbed trailer, and she navigated to the property, which is in Oscar, Texas. She and I are both from Austin. We arrived about 1 p.m. in the afternoon in mid-August, so it was pretty damn hot. The camper was really small, and had only one window air conditioner unit to cool the entire thing, but there was no longer any electricity to it. So we opened the door, which was not locked, and started going through all her stuff. There was cat poop everywhere, and it smelled terrible. Plus, there were hundreds of flies. The cats were all gone. It looked like they had been coming and going through the little flaps on either side of the window unit. I started moving stuff, and found several decayed dead kittens, tons of roaches, fleas, ticks, spiders. I mean, this place was a complete dive. My girlfriend was really embarrassed, and said we would need some cleaning supplies, not realizing it was this bad. Since we arrived there in her vehicle, she drove into town to buy the supplies, and I decided to stay behind and keep working. While I was there alone, I figured I would haul all the big stuff out to the flatbed, which she left behind for me. The minute I started moving furniture to throw it away, the air in the camper got noticeably cooler. At least cool enough for me to notice a difference, given how hot it was outside. The fact that there was no electricity for the window unit, plus very little ventilation, made it that much more noticeable. I ignored it at first, and thought nothing of it. There was a pond nearby, and I figured maybe a nice little breeze had blown over it towards me. I went about my work, and began hearing limbs in the trees around the camper creaking and snapping. There was no wind though. So I figured it was probably squirrels, birds and whatnot. I took a break and went outside for a soda and continued to hear snapping and crackling all around me. It's probably not uncommon, but the area was unusually still for there being so much noise. I went back inside and felt the immediate drop in temperature. I suppose it could be that when we first got there, the sun was shining directly on the camper. So maybe the sun had just shifted and it was no longer in direct sunlight. Maybe. I continued digging through old boxes and found a medium-sized leather trunk with a rusted padlock on it that looked like it was ready to crumble to dust. I didn't want to throw away anything valuable, so I busted the lock off with the heel of my boot and looked inside the trunk. I found the weirdest assortment of crap I had ever laid my eyes on. Various rocks, crystals, candles, lots of little bottles with God knows what in them, old string, strips of leather, and then I found a small skeleton of some kind of animal, probably a cat, but it had stuff written on the actual bones. At this point, I paused and began to feel extremely uncomfortable. It was like the air got heavier and the sounds of insects outside had stopped, and I could feel a pressure against my eardrums. The hairs on my arms and neck stood on end. It became harder to breathe and I felt something. There was almost like an electrical charge in my stomach. I know enough about this type of thing from reading about the paranormal that I could guess I was not welcome there. So I left the camper and waited outside for Trish to come back while I tried to wrap my head around what had just happened. She was gone for what seemed like a really long time, but finally came back, and she was like, "Oh, I thought you would have had it all cleaned by now." Obviously, she had stalled, hoping I would do the lion's share of the work. But I digress. Anyways, I told her about what had happened, and she was like, okay, and? It sounds like the heat got to you. Are you feeling lightheaded? Well, yeah, but for a completely different reason than heat exhaustion. I asked her if she thought what I described was strange, and she seemed amused that I had gotten scared, but didn't answer. I asked why someone would write on an animal skeleton, and she blew it off, attributing it to her grandmother's diminishing mental state. Like I said before, she was gone for a while, so we didn't have a lot of daylight left. Now that we were on a time crunch, she angrily began throwing anything and everything into the flatbed, no longer caring about looking through stuff to see if there was anything that we should keep. And really, there wasn't anything worth salvaging. It was all rotten. After a few hours, we did manage to get it cleaned out, but it became clear that cleaning this thing was not going to serve much of a purpose. It was barely standing as it was. I recommended that she get someone to just haul the whole thing away and leave whatever was still in there, which is probably what we should have done in the first place. She wanted to take one last look around the camper and make sure she didn't miss anything. Here is where things got really weird. I was securing the stuff we decided to keep on the trailer when I heard her ask, "What are you doing?" Not looking up, I said I was just making sure the stuff wasn't going to fall out. She then turned to look at me, her eyes as wide as I had ever seen them, looked back out the window she had been at, screamed and bolted out of the camper. I was like, "What? What is it?" She told me that she swore she had seen me walking on the opposite side of the camper. Not just someone that looked like me, but me. I told her to wait there and I walked around the corner of the camper. I can't really be sure, but for a brief second or two, I do think I saw the outline of a person before it disappeared. According to Trish, this man looked exactly like me, so she thought it was me. She said it even turned and smiled at her, which is when she asked what I was doing. When I answered from out by the car is when she freaked out. We both agreed that at that point there was definitely something off about the place. Not just the camper, but the actual property. I told her I don't know what her grandma was into, or what she did all alone out there for 20 years, but it didn't feel like a good thing. We left around 8 p.m, just as it started to get dark, and never went back. That isn't quite the end though. Last week, about a month after this all happened, Trish asked me if I would go with her to visit her grandma in the nursing home since, again, no one else really ever went to see her. I said sure, and we drove to a nearby city called Temple, where the nursing home was located. We got there, signed in, and they asked us to wait while I went and got her. I was in the lobby checking email on my phone, while Trish and her grandma visited together in the common area. Trish poked her head around the corner and asked me to come back with her so I could meet her grandma. On our way back to her room, Trish said her grandma looked great and seemed to be in really good health. She was lucid, not babbling, and was generally happy. But the minute she laid eyes on me, she flipped out and started screaming, "Why are you here? What do you want with me? Why did you follow me?" The nurses had to restrain her, and they asked me to wait back in the lobby because me being there was upsetting her. I have no idea what to make of this. First, Trish sees someone that looks just like me. Then her grandma sees me and thinks I am following her, as if we had met before, even though I'd never seen her before in my life. I have no explanation for any of this. It all seems too coincidental to brush off. Given what I felt on that property, the weird occult-style stuff I found there, Trish seeing someone that looked like me, plus the way her grandma reacted to seeing me, is just bizarre. Anyways, that's my story. I was not so much scared by any of it as I was fascinated. On a side note, Trish and I agreed a few days ago that dating each other just didn't have that spark we were looking for, but we remain good friends.